Don't cross the streams.
Why?
It would be bad.
I'm fuzzy on the whole good-bad thing. What do you mean bad?
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
So it's interesting. I was talking to my good friend, comic book writer, editor Aaron Sparrow, and just kind of what we missed. Like, why are we still here? You can't read the entire Marvel Comics universe. It's really unfunctional. It's not a whole lot of fun if you read it all. You can't really read the entire DC universe right now. It's completely unfunctional. But we're kind of still here with hope, waiting for something to change. And why are we still here? Obviously, here with me to talk about that is my good friend Aaron Sparrow. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I don't know why we're still here. I really don't. Like, I read, but I'm not as here as I used to be. That's for darn sure. I read far less books than I used to. And this occurred to me the other night. I picked up the Inferno omnibus, the X-Men Inferno storyline, but it's got basically the entire crossover, every other book that it went into, and Inferno was kind of the culmination of a lot of plot lines that I was a fan of when I first got into X-Men. So it's one of those stories that I really hold in my heart, even though maybe it doesn't hold up as well as I remember, but I still greatly enjoyed it. But as I was reading it, I stopped at one point and I thought to myself, I miss comics, and then I miss caring about comics. I miss caring about a universe of comics, and I just don't anymore. I don't care about the entire DC universe. The line, I pick up a book here or there, but overall, most of them I don't. The same thing with Marvel is actually I can't think of a single Marvel off the top of my head. I don't think I'm buying it. No, I'm not buying any Marvel right now, except for older books. I'm buying some back issues, buying some of the omnibus when they come out, and rereading older stories that I enjoyed when I was younger. But it's not a cohesive universe anymore, and I think that is to the detriment of each line, because there used to be group editors that really kept all of that consistent.
At Marvel, I just read an interview, did a video with the Marvel team on AITP, and they're talking to Jerry Duggan. They're talking about, is continuity a hindrance? Is it a blessing? He goes, comic books are a soap opera. If the continuity fits your story, it happened. If it doesn't fit your story, you drive by it. You ignore it. The group editor himself, Jordan White, said, basically, what did he say? He's like, it's been 60 years of X-Men, and you can't expect us to not have like enormous continuity gaps, things that just don't make sense. You could never do 60 years of storytelling making sense now. If that's the mentality of the creators and the group editors at Marvel and DC, why should you or I or anyone invest in these stories, these universes as customers? Because they don't care if the continuity is shared. They don't care if anything's cohesive. If it's a hindrance, you just ignore it. You don't have to be creative and incorporate it into your story anymore.
And that's something that as somebody who is big on continuity and is big on, honoring the things that have come before, even if they weren't that good, trying to find a way to make them better, that I completely disagree with. I think a lot of it stems from probably laziness. I think that when Jesse Snyder was on your show, he talked about having a dinner with a writer who said that the amount of drafts that he does on his script depends on what his page rate is. And from a practical standpoint, I kind of understand that, but coming from somebody who loves these characters, loves this medium, and wants to deliver to fans the very best that I can offer them, that completely flies in the face of my philosophy. My philosophy is, I don't care what I'm getting paid if I took these. But then again, I'm in a unique position where I don't depend on, and I've never really depended on comics for my living. It's just something else that I do. I have a lot of side hustles. So, and I think that, that allows me a certain amount of freedom in, it doesn't matter what my page rate is. I'm going to try to swing for the fences every single time. So, there is that. But, like I said, I think some of it is laziness. I think some of it is just the fact that, they're not being paid enough to care. And that's the big problem with a lot of people in positions is you can't pay people to care. If they don't come in caring, if they don't have a work ethic that makes them care, it doesn't matter what they're getting paid. They're never going to care. You can't make it happen. So unfortunately, I think that the industry is filled with a lot of those people, or people that have just been in it for so long that they can't there's really nowhere else for them to go. They don't feel like they can do anything else, and they're just burnt out and they don't have anything left to give.
I think a lot of what you're talking about there comes down to like a love of the characters and a love of the medium. Now, I do imagine a lot of these creators, not all of them, do have a love of the medium, but it definitely comes. I don't often feel a love for the characters. When I go and read Robert Venditti's Hawkman, you would have thought Robert Venditti had been reading that character his entire life and had a genuine love of that character. That's why it's surprising when you go and you read an interview and you say, well, he'd never read a Hawkman comic before DC Comics asked him if he would write the series. But there's genuine love and appreciation of the character and the history of the character that is filled throughout the pages of that entire run.
Absolutely.
But you don't see that with other characters that a lot of these creators probably have been reading them their entire lives. I almost sometimes get more contempt than anything for them.
It's an interesting thing. I've used this example many times, but there is a certain brand, like in the case of Robert Venditti, you're dealing with an absolute professional. He doesn't know the character. He's going to put in the work and do the research and find what is interesting about that character to him so that he can tell compelling stories with him and use all of the things that have come along with the character over the years and find new ways to do that. I think that Jeff Johns was very effective with that. He took a very poor very poor decision to destroy Hal Jordan and turn him into Parallax and make him a villain. And he had to find a way to redeem him that absolved him of he didn't shy away from any of the things that Hal had done in that storyline. He found a creative way to absolve him of those things. And I think that a good writer, a writer that cares about the craft and that cares about the characters and cares about their integrity, and even if it's not a character that you particularly connect with or you've never read, you have to understand you're dealing with a fan base that cares deeply for that character. So you have to say to yourself, how do I please that fan base? How do I give them something that's going to be satisfying? And that's what I think Venditti does. There's a lot of other writers that I don't think bother to do that legwork. I think that it's just a job. It's just, oh, well, I wanted to tell my story about, character A that does this and has this sexuality and, is this person politically. And then I didn't get to do that. So I'm handed, say, another book. I think that Cecil Castellucci, I think that happened recently where she pitched a book, she pitched an idea and the character wasn't available. And then they said, well, what about maybe do a Female Furies thing? And she stitched that story onto the Female Furies instead of saying, what kind of Female Furies story can I tell? And that's the problem with a lot of writers. And a lot of it just comes down to, how much am I making on this? All right, well, I'm not going to do any research. I'm just going to skim the Wikipedia page. Oh, okay, I got the gist, and now I'm going to write what I want anyway.
It's kind of a tough place to be in. Like recently, there was the Valiant shared universe, which I absolutely adored. I loved it. It felt like every single thing they put out, except for like Faith, and there was a couple of series I didn't think were quite as good. But for the most part, everything across the line was like sterling, completely cohesive, and just beautifully done. It was a smaller universe, so it was easier just to dive into and maintain awareness of everything that was going on. But even then, corporate overlords come in, they take over the company, they kick Dinesh Shamdasani and Warren Simmons out because they have a movie deal with Sony, and the entire line goes to shit when they bring in Heather Antos and a bunch of her idiots from Marvel, a bunch of never words mostly, that she brings in just because they didn't like Richard Meyer to come in and write books, and then shockingly the entire line falls apart.
Hiring based on personal vendetta or starting a business based on vengeance is always a really poor idea. And I think that that's, the pettiness of the industry. We did a video not long ago on Dan Slott's latest Twitter screed, and he was talking about how inclusive and welcoming the committee or the comic industry is. And that's not true. The comic industry right now is very petty and vindictive and has a chip on its shoulder. And I don't know. I think that there's people who love the medium of comics and who really think it's important. And then there's the people that kind of have I almost want to say an insecurity about, well, this isn't like writing an animated series, or this isn't writing a movie. They think of comics as this lesser storytelling device. And I think that I think of comics as the greatest storytelling, the greatest place to tell stories. You can do so much more in comics than you can do in movies and in television, or live action. There's a lot of great things that the comic medium has to offer. And if you are hiring people who don't have an understanding or an appreciation for that, people who aren't students of the game, and of telling these types of stories in this medium, then this is what you end up with. You end up with a lot of people who are just kind of phoning it in, or maybe they're doing the best that they can, but they've just never really invested in doing the work to make sure that they're hitting and making their stories everything that they can be within the medium.
So when you say that you miss comic books, what do you mean? Like, is there a part of your life that's missing? Like, is there a little empty void that you're waiting for something to come in and fill in that makes Aaron a more full, complete person when you have these wonderful stories to connect to, that you're just yearning for it to actually come back? And we're talking about new comics, we're not talking about older comics.
Yeah, there definitely is. I miss caring about these characters. I miss seeing these characters. I miss the consistency of the characters. It used to be, if you were reading Iron Man, and then Iron Man was going to appear in, say, Spider-Man that month, they would have to run that Spider-Man story by the Iron Man editor to make sure that Tony was in character, to make sure that it fit with the current continuity of what was going on in the book. And it made the universe feel real. And that's something that I think the MCU has been really good with so far. I don't know how it's going to be going forward into these new phases now that they've kind of wrapped their first big 10-year arc with Endgame. But it's something that they've done very well and that they took from the comics. And this is the way that Marvel and DC used to be. And I used to be very invested in it. And I'm just not anymore, because I know that whatever book I'm reading, even if I really get into it, it's 6 issues, it's going to get canceled, and it's going to be rebooted with a new creative team, and it's going to go in an entirely different direction. And the editor won't bother to make any consistent choices with the character or tell the writer, hey, this is what came before, and this is kind of, what we want to use as backstory. None of that happens anymore. So that's what I miss. I miss caring about these characters. I miss caring about these universes and the stories that are being told with them. I still very much care about the characters, but as far as I'm concerned, in a lot of ways, the Marvel universe ended with Secret Wars, with Hickman's Secret Wars.
I think a lot of people are in the same boat that you and I are. I want to part way with my money. I want to spend lots of money on comics. I want to fully invest in an entire line. Maybe not an entire line, because Marvel might release 100 new comics in a month. But I have no problems buying 20 new Marvel comics in a month period if it's a good, strong, connective, cohesive universe, and enjoying it. Now, I do buy more Marvel than I want to because I have the channel and I need to. But I want to fully invest and dive into Marvel and be able to tell everybody how great it is. I want to do the same thing for DC Comics. There's nothing more that I want than that. To just be like, wow, I can't believe that they finally gotten it right. Are there some stinkers here and there? But for the most part, everything is pretty darn good, and there are some things that are great. And what it is now is there's some things that are great here and there. There's some things that are pretty good, and then the rest of it is dreck.
It's so frustrating because you and I have both seen comics for we've seen heights of comic book storytelling and heights of these universes, and just to realize how pale an imitation this current industry is, just what a shadow of its former self and of what it could be, is very frustrating. And people talk about how if the fans are just toxic, the fans are just haters, they want these things to fail. And I think that fundamentally misunderstands where most fans are coming from. Are there some assholes out there? Absolutely. But
there are definitely people that are here to watch the train wreck, but it's not the fans that have created that. It's the industry.
Yeah. And for people like you and I, we talk about we try to talk about the positive things about comic books, but we also end up talking about the negative things a lot of the time. But that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about how great comics are. We want to talk about how much we're enjoying, current series and how, how people are really like just knocking it out of the park. That's what we want. When fans have a property that they love and they announce a new movie, fans are so used now to getting something terrible, some less interesting version of the thing that they love, that they're very wary. But in their heart, they want to love it. They want you to give them what they want. And I think there are things out there that are doing that, but they're becoming fewer and far between. And I think that is the disconnect, is these companies don't understand that is where the fans are coming from when they complain about these things, because they know how great they could be and they know how much they love these things. And when they're in the hands of people who are not willing to be good caretakers or just don't care enough to try, it's disappointing and it's soul crushing to people like us who love it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you think about Captain America, there hasn't been like a real competent run on Cap in like a decade. And every time they reboot it, they put a new creative team and they whiff. less and less people care. Nobody really even complained that much about Ta-Nehisi Coates' Captain America run, even though it was a bunch of copies of a copy of a copy of stories that had been told 50 years ago.
And told better.
Much better. It's degraded at this point, what he was creating. It wasn't good. There were some parts that were downright awful. But for the most part, people have checked out. They don't even care anymore. That Marvel has kind of whittled their will down in their hope that even if you relaunch Captain America and it sucks ass, no one says anything because they never expected it to be good anyway. And that's the danger that I think that we're in, is when you lose like some hope and there's people no longer clap back and say, listen, this is bad. You need to fix this. They just say, that is Marvel. And then you've probably lost that customer forever.
As much complaining as we do about toxic fandoms, the worst position to be in is indifference. And that's where we are right now. Is I didn't read Coates' run on Captain America because I was like, well, I know what this is going to be. And Captain America hadn't been good in so long. Captain America is my favorite hero from Marvel. I talk all the time about how much I loved, those early issues and how much I loved Mark Gruenwald's run in particular. That was where I was really, we had Ron Lim and Kieran Dwyer art. It was a really great time with the Serpent Society and Magneto during Acts of Vengeance coming after the Red Skull for his Nazi war crimes. Just really interesting things going on. And there was a little bit of politics in there, and I recognized that, but it wasn't heavy-handed. It was, all very much, the adventure and excitement and good stories, and creativity was kind of the watchword for that era of Marvel and for so many eras of Marvel. And now, we've just kind of, hello, we're here at the House of Idea. Here's the same thing over again. And another problem, I think, is maybe a lot of the creators that are working now, they're very young. I've talked about this before. Not that means that you're not talented, but good
Jerry
stories.
Conway was 19 years old when he started at Marvel.
Exactly.
Jim Shooter, I think, was 15 when he first got signed to DC Comics.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always going to be those people whose talent, it doesn't matter that they're young, they're talented and they have ideas. But I'm gonna say to you, they're probably well read.
They love the characters.
They love the characters, and they're probably well read. They've probably read much more than comic books. So even though they don't have a lot of life experience, there's a lot of things that they can draw from to tell good stories. And I think what we're getting now is we've kind of got a new generation of writers that, either didn't read the comic books. You definitely see that. You definitely see people working who never cared about comic books, and this is just a job to get into animation or to, take whatever step, or just to pay their rent, because they were, a night watchman at a corn silo before this. Now they're writing a comic book. But you also have maybe people who do love comic books, but all they've read is comic books. So all they can kind of, and, they're young and they haven't lived a lot of life, so they don't have personal experiences to draw on. So all they can kind of do is regurgitate what they've already read, and not really have a particularly new spin on it, except for, more scenes in a coffee shop, because that's what they know. Because, we're living in a very soft time where things have been very easy for people, that we haven't had a major war, people haven't had to, get drafted or anything like that, where a lot of these original guys that were coming into comics had those kinds of experiences that they could draw from. A lot of the women too, coming in. Ann Nesenti wrote some brilliant stuff. I loved. I'm rereading Louise Simonson and Walt Simonson's run on X Factor right now. All very good stuff. Maybe not as polished as some of the things that we get today. Just from like a screenwriting perspective, they were very much of their time, but just good, solid storytelling, good, solid characters that you cared about, and that's the most important thing.
So it's crazy, I bring Eric Breen here on the channel a lot, and he's rediscovered his love of comic books. He's fully invested in comic books. This man at one time, his comic book collection numbered 50,000 issues. The man never found a comic book that he wasn't willing to keep forever. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he had to whittle it down a bit. I don't want to go into the number of comics he has now, but it's unseemly. Once again, it's not 50,000.
I don't want to tell you.
This is somebody.
I don't want to tell you the number of comic books that I have either.
This is a man that literally wants to go out and give you his money as often as possible because he treasures comic books and it's something that he loves. He doesn't buy new comics anymore. Certainly not from DC and Marvel. He's just going back and reading old comics.
That's spectacular.
He wants to give you his money, yet you won't let him let him do it. But he does love comics. He's reignited his passion for it, but it's in the older story.
You know who's getting my money now, aside from back issues and some of the Marvel's getting a little bit of my money still, in the sense that I buy the occasional omnibus of stories that I just want on my shelf, in a book heavy enough to kill an intruder. uh, so I do occasionally buy those, and I buy back issues to fill out my runs, or just things that I never read that I want to kind of check out. But crowdfunded comics are getting my money now. All the money that was going to Marvel and DC, the majority of it, that budget now goes towards crowdfunding comics, because I want to help new creators. I definitely want to help people that are outside of the gate-kept industry. People that wouldn't necessarily get a shot because they don't know the right people. I want to help them. I want to help that next generation of young, hungry guys. I just got today. I just got Bric-a-Brac 1 and 2 in the mail. It's a crowdfunded comic by Ryan Hack, and he is a kid who came up to me. I believe it was at Dragon Con, and wanted to talk about comic books and developing his own comic book. And I spent a little time talking with him. And, I remember him, but he hit me up later and he was like, hey, you talked to me at this show. And I remembered the conversation. I was like, oh yeah. What are you doing? And he's like, I'm crowdfunding my own book. You gave me a positive encouragement and now I'm doing it. And there's no greater feeling than that. I'm so happy for him. And so I supported him. I bought a couple copies of his book, and it just came in today. I can't wait to sit down and read it. So that's where my money is going. Is if you got a crowdfunded book, get at me, and get at me on social media. And if I think it looks interesting, or it looks like something that I would enjoy, I'll toss some money your way, because I want to spend money on comics. I just don't want to support corporate comics anymore, because they are no longer supporting me by telling me entertaining stories.
I couldn't agree more. Aaron, thank you so much for sitting down and talking about, we want to love comics, but comics for some reason isn't loving us back at the moment.
Yeah, the things that you love don't always love you back. That's the story of my career.